The film footage today for Letters from the Front is from my home where I live, in a little hamlet called Redesdale. Now, most of those letters we hear from the men from the front, written from the Boer War in South Africa, are from men from this district: Castlemaine, Taradale, Malmesbury, Kyneton. And so I imagine if you could teleport me back 123 years and I was to bump into some of those men over there in South Africa and they said, "Where do you come from?" and I said, "Redesdale," they would probably respond with, "Do you know such and such, whom and whom?" So enjoy the footage while we listen to Letters from the Front. Letters from the Front. The Mount Alexander Mail, the 12th of June 1900. Private Sampson. Quote, "We've been shown a pretty South African souvenir forwarded by Private Sampson to his mother. It is in the shape of a Christmas card and has the usual greetings written upon it. It is made of khaki cloth, the size being about 6 inches by 3 inches, with South African grasses around the border and a heart made of the same material of the centre. A Transvaal silver coin with a Kruger head is firmly fixed in the heart, and the combination makes a very pretty and uncommon Christmas card. It was made by one of the Victorians in camp." The Malden News, the 14th of June 1901, Private John Davis, quote, "The South African War, letter from Private Davis. The following interesting letter has been received from Private Davis and kindly placed at our disposal. Dated Middelburg, May the 1st, 1901. Dear Mother, just a few lines to say that I am still well and happy, and at the same time to mention that I have not received any letters up to date of writing. We would run 5 miles over here for the sake of getting a letter or even a paper. We left Middelburg on the 15th and had a go at the Boers on the 10th. No one was killed, but about 17 were wounded and a few horses shot. On the 18th, nothing of importance occurred, but the following day we captured 23 wagons, 100 head of cattle, 200 women and children, and 52 Boers. That was our first bit of work, but not our last, for on the 23rd, 25 of us were out for cattle among the hills when we were surrounded by 143 Boers. They had us there for 5 hours, and one of our men slipped away to camp, 6 miles away, and brought back 50 more men. They soon shifted the Boers, 7 of whom were taken prisoners. They caught 5 of our chaps, wounded 9 men, and shot 14 of our horses. I never got hit, but I had my horse shot up. Up to date, there are 35 chaps wounded and 3 dead, one of the latter being Ted MacDonald, who was in the same tent as myself. 52 of us who had our horses shot had to walk from Louwfontein to Middelburg, a distance of about 50 miles to get additional mounts. On arrival here, we found we could not get horses for 3 or 4 weeks, so I will have time to write a few letters home. I saw Percy Seymour the other day, and I tried to meet Ted Watterson, but had the bad luck to miss him. We don't hear much news about the war, so do not forget to send a paper or 2. Now and then a Malden News would not go too bad. All the time I have been over here I have not been able to spend a shilling. Tobacco is the only thing you can purchase, but that is good and cheap, viz. 1 shilling and a pound. Remember me to Fred Roder, J. Thomas, Bert Williams, and all the rest of the boys. Tell them I expect to see them soon. Your loving son, J. Davis." The Kyneton Guardian, the 21st of June 1900, Lieutenant A.J. Christie. "Our invalided soldier. Letter from a Victorian soldier. The following extracts from a letter written by Lieutenant A.J. Christie in charge of P Transport Company, the 6th Division column attached to the 9th Division, from Bloemfontein on the 29th of March to his cousins at Bainton, Mr. J.B. Thompson's family. May prove of interest, even though particulars of the incidents referred to have appeared previously from other sources." Quote, "Although I had only a short stay in Cape Town, the thinly veiled hostility of Cape Towners was only too obvious, and if soldiers are in small bodies it becomes quite marked. Within 2 days of landing I was put upon the Imperial staff. I was ordered off to Orange River. I left Cape Town on Thursday, the 8th of February at 9 p.m. On reaching Dar, I received a wire to go on to Navport and see how many convoys of provisions could be loaded there and what state they were in. I finished at 2 on Sunday night and returned to Dar on Monday and went on to the Orange River that night. It was lucky that I did, for on Tuesday I went to Rama, about 12 miles from the Orange River, and had a go at the enemy. I bowled one over. We saw him distinctly fall off his horse, but could not ascertain whether he was killed or not, both sides being anxious to retire. My horse was shot in the eye and killed. We had 14 wounded in the scrimmage, of whom one poor fellow, shot through both legs, died on the way back to camp. We started that convoy, which the Boers captured at Waterfall Drift on the Wednesday morning at daylight. I was to have gone with this, but being wanted particularly at Belmont, Honey Nest, Kloof and Modder, I could not. What a streak of luck for me, for nearly all the soldiers with this convoy were taken prisoners. I had another go at the Boers at Cluckfontein, near Honey Nest, Kloof. This time I had my horse shot in the ear. We were conveying cattle into camp when the Boers fired on us. We had one man killed and several others wounded, but got all our stock safely through. I then went on to Modder River and joined the 9th Division and came on with them to Paardeberg, where Cronje surrendered. We just got there in time for that historic event. I was then given command of P Transport Company of 270 native drivers, 93 wagons, 1,040 mules, besides the soldiers to make up the company. I've been with Lord Robert's army right through the march on to Bloemfontein and came in with his main body. Robert's army came in with his main body when we entered the city. We had a very hard time marching over the veldt from Paardeberg. We had a bit of a fight at Poplar Grove and another at Driefontein. It was here that Colonel Mfelby was killed. I'm happy to say that I have escaped up to now, am well and hearty, in fact getting quite fat. This may only be dirt, as for a fortnight I neither had my clothes off nor a wash. The 9th Division, to which I am attached, is chiefly composed of Highland regiments. We're camped between them. Black Watch on our left and the Gordons, Argyle, Sutherlands and Camerons on our right. Pipers going all day. Mackett's fine. They are without doubt the finest soldiers in the army. I'm really proud to be near them. You must not be disappointed at not getting more and longer letters from me. We get very little chance of writing and still less of getting letters away. On the march from Modder here, there was not the slightest chance of receiving or dispatching any mail, but when we got here it is possible to get a letter through, now that our engineers have repaired the railways. I got my first letter since leaving yesterday from Mr. Green, who used to be a postmaster at Castlemaine. I've not had a letter from home yet. That is not to be wondered at, considering how I've been moved about. Mount Alexander Mail, the 25th of June 1900, Private E. McKinn, letters from the front, writing from Kronstadt on May the 14th to his parents in Castlemaine. Private McMinn says, quote, "Some days we are in the saddle and advancing from daylight in the morning until long after dark, and to make matters worse, our jolly transport wagons either cannot find us or cannot get up to us every day. For 2 days we were without rations, but as luck would have it, we came across a potato field and killed some sheep, so we made up a feed. On the second day, H. Dyer and I killed 2 sheep on our own, got the liver, kidneys and hind quarter, and didn't we have a blowout, and the rest we took to the company. I will try and describe our advance from Currie. On leaving Currie siding, we went out to the South Australian camp, where we arrived a little after dark. Near the railway there were troops of all sorts. We could make out the Australians by the cooey they gave us, but they having got wind of us coming through. On arriving at Currie Kloof, mail was given out, but I got none. At 3 a.m. on May the 3rd, we started on the warpath and came up with the enemy at 7 a.m. and they started shelling us with pom-pom shrapnel, and when we advanced with rifles firing, 3 shells got fairly among us, bursting shrapnel. But after chasing them for about 20 miles, we returned 3 miles and camped with only 1 man shot in the foot. once we got quite close to their guns, but our horses were too fagged to rush them. Before we returned, however, we commandeered some geese, ducks, fowl and hay, but I only got some of the latter. I was put on picket as soon as we got into camp. There were no wagons and nothing to eat. I've lost my 2 days' ration through a hole in my haversack while galloping about. May the 4th, no wagons in until evening, and had dinner of fried mutton and boiled pumpkin. We can get tons of the latter among the maize. Up at 3 a.m. on the 5th and on the move at daybreak, all very quiet until 2 p.m. when we met the Boer in force. It was here we saw a splendid artillery duel, and we, the Victorian Mounted Rifles, advanced on the right flank and came within rifle range. Some of our lads had shots, but it was too late to do much good, so we went into camp. During this day, General French took Winburg after a great cavalry charge. On Saturday the 6th, we advanced 6 miles and the enemy vanished. We had a fighting front of over 25 miles, so we had our work cut out pretty well, loading and unloading transports, etc. And when we are on the march, we don't get very much chance to write. Hi everyone. As you can see, I'm sitting outside today because we've got some really nice sun, winter sun, on the farm here. So I'm making the most of it. Brian's down there servicing his car. I've been up to the corner collecting some gum leaves because they are really good for starting a fire at night to keep us warm. Anyway, today's episode is 2 half episodes really, and I'm calling it Boer Bits and Bobs. So we've got a story from Beaufort. Now 2 episodes ago, you might remember, or you may or may not have seen the episode where we went to Beaufort to look for the memorial for Major Eddie. And we met a lady called Jane who worked at the Beaufort Historical Society. Now I'll put a link up there and also down in the description for both of these episodes today. So Jane, while she was talking to me, and I was very excited to find the bronze or the brass plaque.
I have to get your details because I've got a letter from a Boer War soldier who was killed over there to my great-grandfather.
Sure.
And
I've got somebody you could take.
She was mentioning that her grandfather had got a letter from a man in the Boer War, and I didn't really pay attention at the time, but a week or so later she sent me some information, and one of the things that makes this an unusual story is that this fella was killed by a Boer woman. And I sent Jane a couple of photos that I have of Boer women. We'll have a look at them now. And I mentioned that they were tough women. They had to be. We've got to remember that in the Boer War, it was total war for the Boers. They were outnumbered something like 30 to 1 at the height of the war. So men, women, children, the elderly, they all took up arms to fight the British. Now, a lot of those women stayed on the farm because they had to feed their men when they came home, or a commando might ride through and they'd feed the Boers, which is why the British under Kitchener started burning those farms to try and deny them that food source. So we're going to read the letter that Jane sent me, that her grandfather received from a man called James McGilvray. I'm going to tell you a bit about James and how he met his end, and then we're going to revisit Talbot, and I'll also put a link up to the Talbot story when we get there, and also down in the description. But let's first of all hear about Jane's grandfather's friend, a man called, as I said, I think James McGilvray. The letter is dated 14th of July 1901. Now, this man, he was dead within a week of writing this letter. He's written it to Mr. D. Mackay of Penola, South Australia. And so the letter reads, "My dear friend, I have a writing fit upon me, so I am going to trouble you with a letter and let you know about a little of what we are doing in this place. To give you a slight idea of the country, think of the bald hills at Killanoola, without the swamps or trees and no waste of ground of any kind, and with a stronger coat of grass everywhere, or like the land around Hamilton. Splendid land everywhere. If sheep, cattle and horses cannot do well in this country, then I do not know where they should. Now above there are 3 kinds of snipe here. The ones we see in Australia and 2 others. Plain grouse corans, about the size of a fowl, and 2 birds like the turkey and very like the turkey in their habits. 2 peahens in great numbers, and many more I do not know. Deer, many kinds. I shot one called a kodo last week. He means a kudu, nearly 6 feet high. I'm going to bring its horns home if I can, but they are 7 feet 9 inches long and weigh 5 pounds. Those are scarce now, and I'm told the horns are worth 5 to 9 pounds a pair. I think this country a shooting man's paradise, and when it is settled I'm going to live here for good. Now, about the work we are doing. We're killing sheep by the tens of thousands, cattle and horses we send to the railways. As I said, the British were trying to deny that food source to the Boers by burning their farmsteads. We march through the country, sometimes 6 columns in line like kangaroo men. The Boers, right and left of us, and get in behind us, and then they have a rest for about a month until we come again. We ought to be turned loose and allowed to track the Boer wagons up, capture them, take all their effects and dump their women down in some deserted township and let the Boers find them. At present they are only too pleased to let their women be cared for by the British, and they have a free hand to fight when not hampered by women and children. I suppose you've seen our largest capture of Boers at Grasboer. It was 51 prisoners, 71 wagons, 43 other vehicles, 77 rifles, 7,000 rounds of ammunition, 4,250 cattle, 3,500 sheep. The wagons were loaded with many things. With them were 93 women, 342 children and 29 natives. I think they might be referring to when they caught De Wet on the hop and he lost a lot of his supplies. We buried 16 Boers at the place where the first part of the fight took place, and Lau's column buried 51 the following day where our guns were shelling. The British lost 30 men, including 8 South Australians and 3 officers and a large number of horses. Lieutenant Langley, South Australia, gets the DSO as a compliment to the South Australians, and Lieutenant White, Gordon Highlanders, also gets the DSO for what I don't know. He held up his hands and was captured, stripped of everything by the Boers. Our men were asked by the Boers to surrender, but were told to come and take us. The test of our men came up and the tables were turned with a vengeance. I was, I can't read that, to the Colonel, and was in the thick of it at the finish. Meet with his approval and expect to be in orders this week as an officer. I am in the very best of health, but have a great deal of work to do. Little Peak is doing well and has shown good pluck in 1 or 2 scraps. We have a little fighting every day, but the Boers will not allow us to get close enough to do much. But we do finish one off now and again. I was successful on one occasion myself. Now I'm getting to the end of the paper. I will draw to a close with best wishes to Mrs. Mackay and the family, and not forgetting yourself. I'm yours faithfully, James McGilvray, New South Wales, IBC. NB, this must not appear in print. J. McGilvray. So there's a letter. As I said, he was dead within a week of writing that. I noted that it's written from Heilbronn, which I think is in the Orange Free State. So who was this guy? Now, when Jane sent me that letter, she said if I wanted to know more about him to contact Penola, which is in South Australia, towards Mount Gambier. And she gave me the name of a man that worked at the Penola Historical Society. But when I rang, they didn't know who I was talking about, and I didn't have a surname. So I got talking to a woman from the Penola Society, and she knew exactly who I was talking about and what I wanted. So she sent me information on James McGilvray. And we also got some good photos of him. So James Mackintosh McGilvray, number 9, the 1st South Australian contingent, and number 419 of the 5th South Australian contingent, the son of James and Mary Nee Mackintosh McGilvray, was born in Oban, Scotland, on the 30th of January 1851 and arrived at Portland, Victoria in 1853. He was educated by a private tutor at his parents' property, Beaufort Park, and also became a proficient horseman and marksman. He then managed his parents' other property, Aberfoyle, Lake Mundi, and served for 6 years with the Victorian Mounted Rifles before joining the Adelaide Volunteers in 1879 as a sergeant. James married Sophie Campbell Patterson of Greenbank, Killanoola on the 3rd of February 1881, and they would have 9 children: Christina, Sophia, William, James, Jesse, John, Donald, Elsie and Colin, with the majority being christened at the St Andrew's Presbyterian Church, Penola. He moved to Mount Gambier in about 1884 and joined the local squadron of the Mounted Rifles. James was selected to travel to London with the South Australian contingent for the celebration of Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee on the 22nd of June 1897. That must have been quite a privilege and an award for him. So at the outbreak of the South African War, the 48-year-old, and that's fairly old, volunteered to serve with the 1st South Australian contingent, which left Port Adelaide in the Medic on the 2nd of November 1899. He arrived in Cape Town on the 25th of November. The 127 South Australians were combined with other infantry units from Victoria. As part of the Kimberley Relief Force, they travelled by train some 800 kilometres northeast to the Orange River and marched a further 30 kilometres into the Orange Free State to Belmont, where Australia suffered its first casualty on the 21st of January 1900. Now, we saw one of those casualties in Belmont mentioned. I think it was in I'll put the name up. I sort of remember we talked about the Battle of Belmont. In late January, they were withdrawn by train to Navaport, and that's where Captain Salmon died of the enteric fever at Navaport. It was converted to a mounted regiment and sent forward again to Rensburg near Colesberg. Well, we heard about that with Major Eddie, where the 1st South Australian Lieutenant J.W. Powell from Mount Gambier was killed on the 12th of February. Forced to retreat to a fortified camp at Arundel, another Boer attack was repulsed on the 20th of February. Military tide then turned and the regiment advanced again late in February, recrossed the Orange River at Norvale's Pont and rode some 200 kilometres to relieve Bloemfontein on the 13th of March. Here the Australian regiment was disbanded and the 2 South Australian contingents were combined to form the South African Mounted Rifles. They were soon involved, 400 kilometres to the north, in the taking of both Johannesburg and Pretoria, and from June they campaigned against the Boer guerrillas throughout the Transvaal. Their year of service concluded on the 3rd of November with embarkation on the Harlech Castle at Cape Town, and they arrived in Port Adelaide on the 30th of November 1900, where their unit was disbanded the same day. So James returned to Mount Gambier on the 8th of December 1900. His train paused at the Penola station long enough for an official welcome from the district councillors, during which their chairman, Joseph Darwin, mentioned in his speech that he was pleased to see Sergeant McGilvray. We all knew him as a good shot, and no doubt he had shot something larger than pigeons in South Africa. Ha ha ha. In the new year of his 50th birthday, but giving his age as 44, the blue-eyed, grey-haired James promptly re-enlisted as Regimental Sergeant Major of the 5th South Australian Contingent of Imperial Bushmen, which included his Penola friend Bert Peake. He sailed from Port Adelaide in the Ormazon on the 9th of February 1901 and disembarked at Port Elizabeth on the 23rd of March, where his unit of 316 men combined with the 6th South Australian Contingent and did some outstanding work in the Orange Free State, which he described in a letter home to his Penola friend Donald Mackay. Now that must be the letter here. Yeah, it is. And also he mentioned something about Peake here. Our little Peake is doing well. So he's talking about his friend, isn't he? Okay, so now we're getting to the end here. James, the action, James was probably describing the capture on the 15th of June of General De Wet's convoy with its 6-month supplies, when 160 South Australians were outnumbered by 300 to 400 Boers during a 4-hour action. He also mentioned that Bert Peake of Penola is doing well and has shown good pluck in 1 or 2 scraps with the enemy. During another attack on Boer wagons on the 21st of July 1901 at Van Collins Fontaine near Klerksdorp, that's between Kimberley and Johannesburg, James was fatally shot in the back by a 17-year-old girl. At her trial, Johanna Geldenhuys was acquitted of his murder for lack of evidence, but was sentenced to 12 months imprisonment for the attempted murder of one of his colleagues. So that's the Boer woman that Jane mentioned, and that's how he's remembered, as being killed by a Boer woman when she was really a 17-year-old girl. But so McGilvray was buried at Oliphant's Fleigh, but later reinterred in the Beaufort Garden of Remembrance. He was remembered by contemporaries as a born soldier, hardy, healthy and brave to a fault, with all the dash and recklessness of the Celtic race. His name is recorded on the War Memorial in North Terrace, Adelaide, and Bay Road, Mount Gambier, and his family is remembered by the McGilvray airstrip Coonawarra, which was part of the original Mail Park. So that's the story of James, that lost his life to a shot in the back by a Boer girl. Now the other story is going to be Talbot, and we had visited Talbot once before, and we found the tomb to Captain Salmon.
I'm with you and you're with me, and so we are all together, so we are all together, so we are all together singing.
It's definitely a church, but I don't think it still is a church. It looks like someone's home they've converted, but I wonder if this is the... Oh, watch out, pretty cat. Hello. I wonder if this is the Church of England where Captain Salmon's tribute plaque is. Sorry, it's early in the morning. I'm still trying to get my words together, and I've been driving just over an hour now. If this is the old Church of England, then, or the Presbyterian, then I think there's a plaque inside for Captain Salmon. Now, we saw Captain Salmon's memorial in the Talbot episode, if you go back, but Captain Salmon was a big deal because the Prime Minister of Australia, Sir Edmund Barton, came to Talbot on the train, and he opened the he unveiled the monument to Captain Salmon, who was killed with enteric fever in the Boer War. But anyway, I just stopped by. I think I'll have a little break, have a cup of tea. What a place to live, if it is. It looks converted into a house. So yeah, just stopped for a moment. No. So actually, I might get some brekkie while I'm here. So I'm back in Talbot at the post office now. When I went to the, it's just down sort of that direction there. There's like a little reserve where they have the black marble memorial for Captain Salmon. But when I looked into it, it turns out that the memorial used to stand here outside the post office. You can see, can you see that? So that's where the memorial was, and the reason it was moved was a couple of times people came along and for some reason they toppled there's like a little marble ball at the top of the monument, and the people in the post office got a bit tired of it being vandalised, so it was moved down there. Anyway, finishing off a egg and bacon roll in Talbot, and this I don't have any way of knowing exactly. I think is the Church of England, where the plaque for Captain Salmon was. As you can see, this place looks a wreck. Oh, hang on, there's another church. Christ. Oh, hang on. Yeah. Can't see in there. Well, yeah, it could be, but there's another bigger church. Just see that one? If you can see the blue stone. Wow, this one's a wreck, but look at those towers. They're fantastic. Oh, my sneakers have got holes in them, so I've got to stay off the wet grass. We might drive up to the other one. Can't remember if it's Presbyterian or Church of England. I think it was Church of England. Which brings us to another interesting point, is that so far whenever we've gone into churches looking for plaques for the men who served, they're always Church of England or Presbyterian. We'd never been into a Catholic church and found a plaque there. I wonder if there's any reason for that. Alright, we'll just drive around the corner and we'll see what we can find. I don't know how far Beaufort is from here. Wow. Look at this big place. Oh, that's right, the woman at the Catholic Church, I don't know if you could hear them. They were yelling at me from their bedroom window probably. But they said it was near the football ground. I think I just saw the football ground. It's a big old blue stone place. Pretty fancy. No one ever here. Might come in. Whoa. Try not to take their gate out. Oh, here we go. Okay. Finish off my egg and bacon roll. Let's have a look what the signs say. Quite impressive. Looks like they've added this annex on and removed some by the look of it. It's a COVID prayer. Peppercorn tree, you see those in Australia a lot. But this is the sort of place that you imagine Salmon would have his memorial plaque. His family were quite influential in the district. That's why Edwin Barton came and unveiled the memorial to him, because I think his brother, Salmon's brother, was a member of Parliament. Right, what's this sign? At least tells us what denomination it is. St. St. Michael and All Angels Anglican Church. Right, I reckon that's where it would be, in there. Could be that other one. Right, stop recording. Stop recording.